What is your biggest fear with this whole project?
My biggest fear is that we won't be able to communicate the value of these structures in enough time. These oil platforms, they're in every ocean, and there's potential that all of these structures could have a booming ecosystem beneath the surface. But there's only a few places where there's actually been research done on those platforms. There's been a proven ecological value, so it's very likely that a lot of these structures will be completely removed at the end of their economic life. And to me, that's my greatest fear in this whole project, is that we won't be able to have enough time to really communicate what that value is and work with other scientists and conservationists to say, hey, this is something that's worth preserving, and get that done.
It was a long journey to get here.
Ready? Multiple flights, layovers, a lot of coordination.
We needed 3 flights, the first one being 14 hours, the next one 4 hours, the next one 3 hours. 2 layovers, 1 bus.
Yeah.
And 1 boat trip.
And we are currently off the island of Borneo in Malaysia on an oil platform called the Sea Ventures dive rig. This is ridiculous. And then we were here.
Okay, hold on you guys, let me just hit record. And let's go ahead and start this. So, tell me, who are you?
I'm Emily Callahan.
And I'm Amber Jackson.
And together we started Blue Latitudes, which is a company that investigates converting offshore oil platforms into artificial reefs. We started Rigs to Reefs because we got the opportunity to go diving on the offshore oil platforms in California and saw how special and beautiful the reefs were. And then we also learned that they're going to be pulled out. And that wasn't just unique to California. There was oil platforms all over the world with these really special reefs that were all going to be pulled out at the end of their useful life. Because most people don't associate artificial reefs and coral reefs and functioning reefs with oil platforms.
Yeah.
And given the state of so many of our oceans today, and given the fact that we all use our cars, we all use plastic, we all need these platforms, it just seemed like such a devastating thought to think that we would pull these oil platforms out and take them on shore and create a massive carbon footprint and destroy the reefs that were living there.
Yeah, it's crazy because most people think about offshore oil and gas and they just think industrial, steel, anything that you can see from your beach chair, which doesn't look anything like a reef. But below the surface, there's so much more. Every beam and cross beam is covered in life. You see schools of fish, and the structures really are functioning as artificial reefs.
Amber and I have been trying to come out to Malaysia to dive on the Sea Ventures dive rig for almost 3 years now. We saw the image in a New York Times article, and it just seems so outlandish and out there. We've kind of made it our mission to get out here and explore explore it and see what the potential is and convert it into an ecotourism resort.
All right, partners.
All right, it's time to meet the crew. We have Scott, our filmmaker extraordinaire. We have Kyle, who's been helping us with our underwater photography and videography. And last, we have my dad, explorer and underwater diver, who's been helping us with all of our scientific data. And he's here because
My daughter asked me to go on an expedition with her and her colleague Amber to examine the biodiversity of the oil rig compared to the natural reef in Malaysia, specifically Mabul. You get that kind of an ask, you can't say no.
What I'm trying to understand is how will you know that this methodology is successful so that you don't keep repeating it the next day? So is this just kind of a judgment, you look at it with a thumb and say it's close enough?
I think you're just going to watch the footage.
Is that how you're going to do it?
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to run it through R while we're here. Yeah. So
but we'll be able to say, like, okay, Amber's moving up and down because there's a bit of a swell. So how are we really just repeating the same footage as we're doing the spiral, or do we need to increase our transect length?
Am I too close to the piling, or am I too far, or am I so far away that I'm catching all this background, just water, and not actually being focused on the platform reef?
Yeah.
So I mean, we don't know. All we can do is start diving and trying our best.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed this actually works.
Yeah.
The rig itself was a converted oil rig. It was a working oil rig in the 1980s in Panama. It was then decommissioned and towed to a scrapyard in Singapore. And soon after, the Malaysian government bought it and turned it into a resort.
The Sea Adventures dive rig is very special. It's one of the only offshore oil platforms that's been converted into an ecotourism resort. This is the first time I'm staying on a rig hotel. This is the first time I'm actually on an oil platform, ironically, since I've been working on rigs to reefs now for almost 3 years. It's definitely given me a lot of perspective on the people that actually live and work on these platforms full time. It's challenging, the rooms are very compact, we're showering with salty water, we're brushing our teeth with salty water.
Tour of the room here. I was getting some sleep. Let's look at the facilities here. Shower is looking top notch.
I think we've eaten boiled chicken like 15 times.
Living on the rig itself, it's far more different than you are going beach resort or any of the resort around here, where you can basically living here. Just try to live in this rustic, I would say rustic feeling of this rig.
The unique part of the experience is you really are living on the water. You open your porthole and you're on the water. You get lowered into the water from the platform, and it's a really unique experience to be really connected to the environment that you're sitting in.
We're finally here. We're finally here. Finally getting to dive a platform we've been going to dive for 3 years.
Yes.
What are you hoping to see?
I think it's gonna be a whole new environment, and I'm
You're gonna see Grace, the turtles.
I think we're gonna see turtles. I'm really glad we have the dive reel though.
It's a pretty unique setup. You literally eat, sleep, and dive off of the rig. Every morning you wake up, you wave to the dive operator who lowers you down off the side of the platform and immerses you in the water. I've never really experienced anything like this. While we are here, we are using stereo video technology so that we can compare the fish life that's found on the Sea Adventures dive rig with the life that's found off the natural reefs. And When we look at the data that we collect, we'll be able to make a better assumption about whether or not this rig is productive, if it's a good home for all these fish, as compared to the natural reefs, which we know are successful.
So this is our stereo video technology. It's pretty simple. You got 2 GoPros here along a set bar. The diver swims along a reef or a transect and captures everything within the field of view. We decided to use stereo video because it's a fairly new methodology that, number 1, is low impact. So you don't want to scare all the fish away while you're trying to film them. Number 2, it's affordable and it's easy to transport. And 3rd, it produces accurate results. You have a hard copy of everything you saw underwater, whereas we used to have to count fish by hand. And stereo video makes it easier to identify species and record fish abundance. So with the 2 cameras angled inward, it captures the entire field of view that we see as we're swimming forward. And we can take all that data, count the fish, and then drop it into our statistical tools to analyze how many species and fish individuals we see. Basically what the software does is it demystifies the fish counting process and it allows us to identify species and fish individuals.
Scientific diving is inherently challenging because instead of just floating along and enjoying all the nice marine life, instead you have a task and a job and you got to get it done, and sometimes that can be challenging in that sometimes you push your limits a little bit because you want to get that one more transect, or just trying to fight a ripping current going by trying to lay down a transect line. Transecting means the data and information that we're gathering from point A to point B as we're swimming along this rope. And in bigger picture terms, it means all the data that we're gathering of the rig itself and the coral reef surrounding it.
And then here at Mabul and Callahan at the House Reef, we tend to see what we call macro life, much smaller species, things like nudibranchs, ghost pipefish, a variety of seahorses, crabs, which all live in and around the coral.
House reef comprises of artificial reef, and also this some they will call it as a pile of junk, but the function of this pile of junk is protection or the house for some of the marine life around, especially all the small fish, and sometimes you can see big fish spawning around this pile of junk.
The house reef is comprised of different sunken ships and nets. It almost looks like a junkyard. They've thrown tires, different things to create some sort of topography that surrounds the rig. And interestingly enough, they've placed this rig in a soft bottom environment that really doesn't have a lot of natural hard substrate, a lot of natural hard corals or reefs, and so we may have seen a few big schools of fish, but as far as like interesting corals or anything like rays, they weren't here.
Can be a really challenging idea to talk about repurposing these structures for something that benefits the environment. And it's a really exciting challenge to come in with a scientific objective and be able to say, you know what, let's think about this idea of ocean conservation differently. It doesn't have to be environmentalists and scientists against the oil companies. Maybe there's a way that we can work together and come up with a solution that benefits the environment.
I would say I think this trip is a really big undertaking, and I'm a little nervous just because there was so much planning, and I hope this is a good option. I hope that this sort of technology really works, and and I hope we get good data, but you never know. And so I think that's what I'm nervous about, and I'm hoping in 10 days that I can be like, yes, it is a good idea. We can do this.
Or yes, these are the flaws, and now let's go.
Never use stereo video to do this again.
Don't use it. Let's use something else. Let's come back next year.
Back to counting fish.
Yeah, we'll come back next year.
I think it's going to be very different staying on Mabul. I'm wondering how it'll impact our day-to-day life and our mindset going out there. So far, we've just been on the Sea Ventures dive rig and surrounded by tourists, and now we'll be moving back to the island and actually surrounded by some of the local population, which means the sea gypsies. I think we're really interested to see how they live. We've read so much about them, we've seen the photographs, and I think we're really excited to get immersed into that culture.
I'm excited to get to Mabul and maybe get a chance to interact with the locals, learn about the culture and about these people who've lived on the ocean for years.
It's a little bit more of a relaxed, laid-back attitude, so we'll see if that impacts our transects and how much stuff we get done. So.
We're headed out to dive on some of the natural reefs that surround this island.
Amber, Emily, Kyle, Kevin, Scott, and today's staff of course, that's myself, diving staff. Hi. And we got, okay, you got everything you need, basically, and
Got it. Check, check, check.
The scientific diving that we'll be doing here in Mabul will be focused primarily on horizontal transects. So unlike on the Sea Ventures dive rig where our transects were vertical, going up the legs of the structure, these will be horizontal, gliding across the tops of the reefs. The dives we've been doing out here are definitely more challenging than what I was expecting. Challenging in that you don't get everything done that you're hoping to get done in a dive. You might say you want to get 5 transects done, but maybe you come up and you only got 1. You might say you want to get done 5 dives, but you're both exhausted and you can't get that last one in just for safety reasons. So I think it's definitely been a lesson in managing your expectations. But at least the good thing is that we've definitely gotten good data, and I've been impressed by the sort of life that we've seen. It's really interesting being here because I've never really been on a tropical island where I didn't want to swim in the water. And that's because there was so much trash here in the water all around the island. And I wasn't expecting that. So many of the visuals I've seen have been of pristine oceans and coral reefs around here, and on every dive we're collecting trash.
Here it's pretty much the same it is all over the world. Overfishing, destructive fishing practices, pollution, marine debris, even things like human impacts on the environment, either intentionally or not intentionally. It's just that here, because we live in an island, we're much closer to it and we see it much more often than people who maybe not be living in an island, living further inland would see. You see beside our resort there's some bajau, there's some bajau houses. Also in front you get the bajau boats. You've seen the boats, I can't imagine spending your entire life on that boat. It's just mind-boggling, but part of the problem is it's with waste and stuff like that on the island, there's no waste management system. So any rubbish that people have on the island is their own responsibility to get off. People such as the Bajau don't have the luxury of planning ahead of how to get waste off the island because they're too concerned with their day-to-day life of finding food and getting through the day and through the next day. There's a lot of rubbish on their area because they don't know what else to do with it. But this is, for example, if you think maybe 30 years ago, this wouldn't have been a problem. People use banana leaves or disposable sources. You could throw it overboard. That's it. It biodegrades, that's fine. But people here maybe don't realize that if you throw something overboard, it's not just going to go away. It lands in the reefs and it stays there. Now, this is not for us to judge them for not knowing that because you can see a lot of people back in Europe or in the States or whatever, they still throw rubbish away and they know exactly what happens and what harm it causes. Whereas these guys don't really get that.
I would say how in this part of the world you can have such a juxtaposition of one reality versus another. Us scuba diving, enjoying the world, and then walking through the Sea Gypsy village here in Maboul. The contrast in life was amazing to me. It was just amazing.
And it's unlike a culture I've ever experienced before. They live off the water and most of their homes are actually extended into the sea. Reading a little bit about their history, a lot of them feel more comfortable on the water than they do on land. When they have their babies, the first thing they do is they dip their feet into the water so that they can connect with the resource that really provides for them. That's where they've lived their lives for so many years, but something has been drawing them back to the land, drawing them to the land, and walking through the villages, I really got a sense that they were culture in transition, that they were transitioning away from living their life on the water to living on the land. And I thought that that was really interesting and not quite sure what was pulling them to the land.
The second way is we actually try to have a positive impact through our conservation programs, which include turtle conservation, shark conservation. Most importantly, my favorite is supporter engagement, which is not only like getting tourists or visitors to our areas involved, but also getting the local communities involved in conservation activities or giving them the ability to carry out conservation projects themselves. For example, with turtle conservation, like there's so many threats facing turtles worldwide, like numbers have plummeted. We have a practical conservation program. So it's a hatchery where we try to release as many hatchlings as possible back into the natural environment. So the idea is that with our hatchery, if a nesting turtle is found anywhere on Maboul, the locals will come and tell us about it. We watch until the female stags the nest, covers it back up and goes back out to sea, and then we relocate the nest and bring it back into our hatchery. And that means that it would be safe from human predation, dogs, cats digging it up, anything like that. And the guests stand on either side. We create a big semicircle, sort of like a protective barrier if you want. Cats and dogs can't get out the hatchling, and we release them all in one go. The idea is that we get as many as possible up out of the nests and out into the ocean, safety in numbers. So far, since the start of the program in 2011, we've released over 6,000 hatchlings back into the wild, which is quite a lot. So a lot of the work we do, or the marine debris or beach cleans or whatever, or community outreach, is always aimed at the children. Because when you start telling children about plastic and where it ends up and the harm it's going to cause, if you keep telling early on and on and on, it takes seed. And maybe one of them will start telling the others. And then you can see like a ripple effect.
Hello.
so much more difficult to change an adult's point of view. I mean, this is not unique here, the same back in Europe. It's much, much easier to work with children.
Okay, thank you.
So my favorite quote is by Jacques Cousteau, and the quote goes, "The sea, once it casts its spell, it holds one in its net of wonder forever." And I find that to be so true, whether it's from leading people on platform dives or when people get to experience the ocean for the very first time. When you look at the ocean, it seems so one-dimensional. You don't really see what's below the surface, and therefore it's so unrelatable. But the second you slide beneath the surface, you're entering into a whole new world and gaining that new level of understanding, and you just strive to dive deeper and learn more.
Sipadan Island!
Sipadan was one of the best dives I've ever been on.
Some of the best diving in the world. Sipadan is a seamount which rises out of the ocean continental shelf 600 meters from the ocean floor. Because it's so deep, there's a huge variety of life that's attracted to it, from typical deep water species like sharks and rays, and a huge amount of really healthy coral. The water here is a very consistent temperature, 27 to 29 degrees, which is absolutely perfect for coral. So certainly in the shallows, we get really healthy, soft and hard coral, which needs light and warm water in order to grow. And then we've got the much deeper water species like sharks, rays, and a huge variety of sharks. So really it has everything at Sipadan.
It was just bountiful with life, seeing schools of jack, then schools of barracuda, a turtle, sharks, a whole bunch of other divers, all just moving around quickly in the whipping current. It was something else. Really exciting to be there.
Sipadan is one of the most unique dive spots I've ever been to, with so much life and chaos, because you got a ripping current and every time you look, it's something new. A big school of barracuda, a big school of jacks, and then below your feet, 10 white-tip reef sharks, and then a turtle nesting in the corner. And then the whole time you're trying not to bump into everybody else that's also experiencing that. That was way more than one sentence. Yeah, I don't think you can describe Sipadan in one sentence.
You can tell that this country really cares about that specific marine resource. They take really good care of it. The reef is incredibly healthy, and so it was really, really cool to see that.
So unfortunately, we weren't able to do any transects on Sipadan Island, and that was primarily due to the very tight government control of the area, which is also a good thing. We need to file for very strict permits just to even be able to dive on the island. So to be able to do any sort of scientific diving, you need to work strictly with a local university there. However, I think visually we got what we needed. So although we weren't able to do any transects, we can tell you that marine preservation is absolutely the best way to protect our oceans.
What was your favorite moment on the trip?
Oh, easily on our third time doing Barracuda Point on Sipadan, seeing the bumphead parrotfish, excuse me. They were like, honestly, it was like watching a herd of rhinos. And once you got absorbed into the school where they closed in behind you, and you know, when they poop, it's sand.
Okay, also you don't get absorbed. You chose to swim into them.
And then they accepted me as part of their school.
It was.
And watching them jostle each other and then, you know, the silt coming out from them pooping, and honestly, I felt like I was in a herd of rhinos. And I would not ever think to compare fish to a rhino, but that was just a surreal experience of this massive fish. I mean, their beaks, it's like 2 pieces of a cantaloupe cut in half. They're huge, huge, definitely a humbling experience.
Yeah, probably like way more intimidating than any shark I saw out there with those bumphead fish.
I think one of the biggest takeaways that we hope that people see after this trip is that we need to start thinking a little bit differently and creatively about ocean conservation. We've seen Sipadan, which is a really unique and special marine protected area, but it's the only one in the whole area. And we could just see by all the fish life booming there that it was a successful marine protected area, they did a good job protecting it, but it's unfortunate that it's just one. And in an area this big, which is much biodiversity, I think what we'd like to do is encourage people to think about what are some other ways that we can encourage this marine biodiversity, what are some other ways to create reefs from materials like this rig, which was a great opportunity to repurpose something that used to pump oil, and now it can house divers to encourage divers to visit reefs. It encourages divers to explore other ways that we can save these reefs. And at the end of the day, it's no longer us against the oil companies. We need to start thinking together creatively, because that's really the only way to protect more and more of our ocean. It can't just be us against them. One marine protected area, everything else gets ravaged. We really need to start to think differently, and this platform is an excellent example of that.
When you get to this ladder, hand me your fins and climb aboard and do it promptly, quickly, okay? Don't waste any time, because we got an active site here. So just move as quickly as you can.
There is no other experience like diving on a platform, especially an active one. It's enormous. You're diving on the scaffolding of the Empire State Building. It's vibrating, and there's life all around you. You see sea lions cruising in from all different directions, sheephead, Garibaldi. The beams themselves are so thick with mussels and scallops that you don't even see steel underneath it. And it's incredible. You would not expect that. So it really feels like you're diving on a vertical reef. You're not diving on an oil platform. Should we talk about stats first, or talk about?
I think.
Because I feel like to talk about the stats first.
Okay, ask us one more time. Yeah.
What was the takeaway from the trip to Borneo?
So our biggest takeaway was using statistical analysis and stereo video technology as a tool to study abundance on a reef compared to an oil platform. A natural reef versus an oil platform. Which one is more successful?
We found that of the 37 transects we analyzed from Borneo, there was over 1,500 different fish and over 126 different species of fish. And while the natural reefs in the area only had a median of 23 fish per transect, what's amazing is that on the rig, on average, we observed 83 fish per transect. And what this tells us is that the habitat provided by the rig is successful, and it is attracting fish, it's producing fish, and it means that fish are choosing that habitat more often than the natural reef habitat. They're working.
So we see that same kind of thing happening here in California. So when we dive on the oil platforms off of here, we see the same fish that we would on our nearshore rocky reefs. The biggest issue that we're facing right now is the decommissioning of platform holly. After the oil company Veneco went bankrupt, the state, California state, is now responsible with decommissioning Platform Holly, and they have to come up with a decision about what the best way to decommission it would be, to either fully remove it or leave it partially or completely in place as an artificial reef. And what we learned from our trip to Malaysia is that that reef that you see out there is going to be mimicking the natural environment. So Platform Holly on the beams and cross beams that you see is going to be mimicking the natural rocky reef environment that we see in Santa Barbara. People don't know the value of these reefs, and the only way to help them understand it is to take video, to take pictures, to come out here to document it and bring it back and show it to them. And that's what we're doing here. It's just us, our GoPros, our team of underwater photographers, and our friends. And we're here to capture these incredible reefs and take it back and show the people of California, hopefully some legislators, and maybe make a difference. So.